All right, welcome to the first emotional safety workshop in our series. Today, we're going to be talking about heroes and villains. I'm Shay Malone. I have been doing mental health and special education with youth and families for over 20 years. And I believe that emotional safety is one of the most important things we can do for everybody, for anybody, just to understand ourselves, how to relate to other people better, things like that. And so the first two workshops are shorter. It's this one, and the next one is just going to be understanding emotional safety and what that means. And it may seem like that should have been the first one. And I thought about like, well, why didn't I put that one first? But I think a lot of us feel like we are the problem. And or we're scared to be the problem, like terrified to be the problem. And so I wanted to start where people are. And so today we're going to talk about heroes and villains. All right. I'm going to share my screen and hope everything goes relatively well. All right. So, um, I am going to go through the slides, but it's mostly going to be me talking about the slides. This particular workshop is based on the idea that when we feel like we're the bad guy, we either feel bad about ourselves, um, or we feel so bad about ourselves that we don't allow ourselves to feel bad about ourselves. And so that's the premise. That's what we're starting with, and let's see where it takes us. Okay. William Shakespeare, in his play As You Like It, said, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." We are all acting. We are all performing to this idea of who we are in our head. And when things don't match who we are in our head, we have to make them match. And so when you meet people, when you interact with people, you have to realize that they are following a particular script and that their script tells them that they're either the hero or the villain. So I want you guys to take a moment and I want you to think about whether you remember the first time you felt like the bad guy, or or you felt like you were the reason for other people's problems. I know for me, it was probably when I was around age 8 or 9. For some people, it starts as early as 2 or 3. In this workshop, we will be going through 5 main topics. Every story has a villain. No one wants to be the villain. Villains are the victims of misplaced blame. Becoming and being a hero isn't easy, and every hero is a villain in someone's eyes. So we'll start with every story has a villain. So if you take a moment and you think of your favorite stories and some of our most famous stories, Adam and Eve, Hansel and Gretel, all the fairy tales we grew up with, Sleeping Beauty, all the Disney stories, our famous epics, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, historical epics, the Odyssey, things like that, Moby Dick, um, the Christmas Carol, the Incredibles, Anne of Green Gables. And I threw that one in because Some stories, some of our famous stories, don't seem to have a specific bad guy, and that's important. But every story does indeed have a villain, or if it's easier to think of it that way, every story has a problem, right? No one signs up to be the villain. No one wants to be the villain. And this is where we start really getting into how do people become the bad guy if no one wants to be the bad guy? Well, our villain origin stories start in childhood, and they are whodunits. It's whose fault is it? So, I want to start by sharing the knowledge that every child that is born into a natural state of anxiety. In our current society, when we think of anxiety, we think of something that is a problem, something that has to be eliminated, something that requires medication support, maybe. And I want to counter with a couple of things. Anxiety is not something that we are going to ever be able to get rid of. Some people have more anxiety. Some people have so much anxiety that it impacts their ability to develop healthy relationships, perform their job functions accurately, um, do well, feel good about themselves, things like that. But the natural state of humanity is anxiety. And so let's talk about that part. When a baby is born, they know, well, I don't know if they know or not, but instinctively there is anxiety because they cannot get up and feed themselves. They cannot go to the kitchen and make themselves a snack when they're hungry. They don't know the language. And so when they come into the world, they can't say in the same language that their parents have, "Hey, I'm sleepy. Could you help me go to sleep?" They can't say, I want to feel comforted. Could you hold me?" The only thing they can do is to cry and hope that someone is paying attention. And so from the time that babies learn to communicate, they are looking for someone to take care of them, someone to meet their needs, and they're looking to their adult to do that. As they get older, they start to learn that who they are as a person and who their adult is as a person are separate people. They don't want to be put down, right? They would rather get up and go play, but somebody is telling them they have to go to bed. They want to climb up the bookcase so they can see that cool thing at the top, but somebody is telling them to get down. They don't want to eat the yucky stuff, but somebody is insisting that it's good for them and they need to eat it. They're not hungry right now, but somebody is telling them that it's time to eat. And so there begins this battle between who the child is, what they want, their understanding of the world, and their trusted adult. The responsibility that the adult has to the child begins to come up. And so the child learns to figure out what the acceptable amount of autonomy is. How far can they go? How much can they do? What can they get away with before their trusted adult sets a boundary? Some children are met with understanding and support and redirection. Some children are met with anger and shame and censure. And this is really where we start to see the development of the villain. So, one of the reasons our natural states of anxiety, as we said, is whether or not the person is going to take care of us, is because we are dependent on other people for survival. In that context, if we think about it that way, then when a child feels like their adult doesn't like them, or if they know that their adult is going to hurt them, they start to feel like they are the problem. But also their natural fear of who's going to take care of me becomes amplified. And they become afraid of one of two things. They become afraid that they will be abandoned, and abandonment equals death. We see abandonment develop when children's needs are ignored. Um, when they're not allowed to be who they naturally are. On the other hand, there's a fear of death, natural death in the physical. And so when parents yell, and don't get me wrong, I don't know of any parents that haven't yelled at their kids, right? Um, but when kids are frequently yelled at, if they are frequently punished, they begin to fear that they are going to die physically. And so they learn that in order to be safe, in order for their physical and emotional safety to be guaranteed, then they need to make sure that their adult is happy. And this is an imperfect system, right? Some children become people pleasers. They will bend over backwards to make sure that everybody is okay, right? They will we'll go into the stress responses in a second, but they will do things that they know will make their adults happy. When they start getting worried or anxious or fearful that they've done something wrong. Some kids will go the opposite way. They feel like they can't do anything right. And so they either just do what they feel like they want to do, or they might do things specifically to aggravate their adult in a way that also lets them know that while they're scared, the adult is paying attention. It's a very complex, very subconscious, very underlying system that starts between, I would say, 15 to 18 months and develops through 3 in homes where there isn't a lot of emotional safety and understanding and support. Now, in some homes, there is understanding and safety and emotional and support. And in those homes, we see later development of the idea that I am the problem for the child. That happens somewhere between 7 and 10, when there is a natural developmental stage where kids start to feel like they're the problem anyway, it's a shift to realizing I have power in my world. Well, a different shift. They're more conscious that they have an effect on their adults in a bigger context. And so what is common is that the development of I'm the problem in this situation may come from not the caregiver directly or the trusted adult directly. It may come from situational things in the home, like poverty, right? Um, Recognizing that they're different from their peers. It may come from bullying. It may come from situations in the home that don't directly involve them, but they observe it and it affects them and it causes anxiety. Without intentional and additional and extra support for that anxiety, children are still egocentric enough that they feel like either they are the problem or they are part of the problem and they can help by not being there, right? And so I don't know if you guys know this, but child suicide is not uncommon between the ages of 8 and 12 especially, or suicide attempts is not uncommon between the ages of 8 and 12 especially. And it depends on kind of the child's perception and support systems and things like that. Um, but the reason I say it's a whodunit is because without helping a child contextualize what the problem actually is, they're going to center themselves. If the adult places, if the adult centers the child as the problem, then they feel like the problem very early on. If the adult or adults in their lives are supportive, but there are other factors that are not explained or understood, they can still develop the idea that they are the problem. You'll see it happen later on, upper elementary, early middle school. It can develop at any point, depending on circumstances, but in the earlier years, if they've had a foundation of understanding what's going on, they are less likely to feel like they're the reason for the problems. All right, so that is kind of how the I'm the problem, I'm the villain um, develops. So, another part of the villain's origin story is how responsibility is placed. And I had started to go into that a little bit with the development, but here I'll go into it a little bit more. When there is anxiety, stress, distress, right? There is a cause. Children are more likely to feel like the problem if they are told that the cause of the stress and the distress of their adult is their fault. And we do this in a lot of different ways, and we do it in ways that are very unintentional, often very unintentional. And so we might be frustrated and overwhelmed, and we tell our kids that they're annoying us, or just go somewhere and be quiet, or I can't take it. I had a client once who shared with me that for the longest time, they thought that their parent didn't want them around because they would say, don't worry about it. And that seems so innocuous, right? You're telling a child not to worry because you feel like it's not their place to worry, right? Um, but in this particular instance, it was a dismissal, right? And it was a repeated dismissal of them trying to find out what was going on in their world. And so villains develop when they feel like they are the reason for other people's problems. And a lot of times, this comes from being told that something's wrong with them, that they're not doing things right, that um, the way they're behaving, the way they're thinking, the way they're XYZ is wrong, right? In reality, most situations, most things are natural occurrences, right? Um, Child is learning independence, learning autonomy, which is something we want them to develop, right? And so they go and they get milk and they want to pour themselves a glass of milk or they want to make a bowl of cereal because they've seen us do it and now they want to do it themselves. And they, of course, are still learning and they spill milk all over the place, right? Well, how they're responded to shapes how they understand themselves, how they understand the problem. Because again, every story has a villain, AKA a problem. And our whole life is a story, right? So they're pouring the milk, they spill the milk, it's all over the place. The parent may have been in the room, they may have come into the room. How do they respond? Yelling, blaming the child for something that children are naturally supposed to do, frustration, understanding, support. When a situation happens, we can place the blame on a person or people, or we can place the blame on the situation, or it can be all of the above. But what very often happens with villains is that the blame is placed on one person. And it's often the person who's least responsible, right? Because at age 4, a child is the one with the least understanding of how things work. Adults know that the milk might be too heavy. You have to hold it a certain way. You have to balance it. You need help with it. Adults often don't understand typical development because they themselves grew up being held accountable like they were full adults. And they pass that down, right? And so adults who felt like the problem as children often, without intention, begin the same process with their own children. In this particular situation, with a 4-year-old, I would say that the adult is 95% responsible, 90 to 95%. I have a math background. I love percentages. The child then is 5 to 10% responsible. But Were those expectations communicated? Has that been taught? Did we tell the child, hey, if you want to get food, I know you're learning to do things on your own. Come get me first, right? Often, when we have children that grew up to be adults who already think that they're the problem, this is not something that's ever been shown to them. And that's something we'll touch on a little bit more in a minute. But ideally, what will happen is the adult recognizes that they are the primary responsible person, that their job is to support and guide the child, and that really the blame only needs to be in the situation, right? Not saying that we blame the milk, right? But we place the responsibility on learning, on development. Like this is a natural process. So when we encounter the spilled milk, we don't cry over it. We don't yell at it. We say, oh, you made a mess when you were trying to get your milk. Let's clean it up together. And then as the adult, we make adjustments because we hold the primary responsibility. And so maybe we'll help them practice. Maybe we'll get a child-sized container where they can do their own milk and cereal. Either way, the idea is not to give most of the responsibility to the person who is actually supposed to hold the least amount of responsibility. And ideally, we want to get to the point where we're not blaming a person for everything. And we'll talk about that in the emotional safety workshop. All right. So let's talk about how we go from being the villain, the problem, to being the hero. If we are fortunate, we become the hero very early in our story, and we are taught that we are amazing, that we are valuable, that we don't have to achieve a certain thing, we don't have to look a certain way, we don't have to be anything other than ourselves to be amazing. That is our ideal situation. We get taught that by our adults who say things like, you did a great job with that. Oh, I see you're having a hard time. Let me help. Things like that. Not when we only focus on other people's expectations or achievements. So let's say this is not where you started. You did not get the validation and support and encouragement that you ideally would have gotten as a child. And you often feel like you're the problem, right? Well, you can begin to learn to become your own hero. One, it comes from understanding the idea that blame was placed mostly on you when it wasn't supposed to be. And so we have to properly decide whose fault the situation is. We begin to do things like set boundaries and accept responsibility only where it makes sense to accept responsibility. We look for people who give us acceptance and validation and support and encouragement. All of these experiences help us learn and understand that we're not the bad guy. And for a lot of people, this is a very revolutionary concept. The idea that I'm not the reason everybody's miserable, or I don't have to make sure everybody's happy. These can be mind-blowing for a lot of people. And here I want to come back to the ways in which we behave when we feel like we're the problem or the villain. Because the more we understand about being or becoming the villain, the more we can start to shift things to be and become the hero. So, the 4 stress responses to anxiety. When we are anxious about how something is going to go, about our adults being displeased, or being in danger, because again, displeased adults for a child means that their life could be in danger. And we carry that feeling throughout our lives. There are 4 responses. 2 of them are to move towards the person that we're worried is going to leave us. 2 of them are to push away from the person that we are worried is going to leave us or hurt us. Okay? Fawning is most often called people pleasing, right? We want to make them happy. So if somebody is upset with us, we try and fix it, right? Oh, somebody's unhappy. It must be my fault. What can I do to make them happy again? And that leaves all of the responsibility on us. The other response is kind of a neutral move toward. It is freeze. And it's kind of like we just agree with whatever the person who is upset with us is saying, right? We don't want them to be upset with us. We need them to accept us. And so it's your fault. The moon is made of green cheese. You should have done better. Yep, you are absolutely right. I should have done better. Because whatever I need to do to make you okay with me is what I'm going to do. The 2 that move away are fight and flight. So let's do flight, because this is kind of like a spectrum of like awayness and towardsness. Flight is less combative and less interactive than fight. So we may just avoid certain topics, avoid certain conversations, wait till everything blows over, because no one can maintain intense emotional states. So if someone's angry at us, right, they're not going to be angry forever. If we can just lay low until the storm passes, it will be okay again. And that is our flight. Fight is when we decide that we have to stand up for ourselves against this problem. You're upset with me? Well, I'm upset with you too. As a matter of fact, let me tell you why you're wrong. Let me tell you why this doesn't work for me. And it seems healthy and independent and autonomous, except instead of doing that and believing that we're right, we're really mostly defending ourselves against being wrong. We're really defending ourselves against being the villain. And so once we understand which patterns we have to keep others happy, we can start figuring out how to shift them. Because while it seems like keeping other people happy is what keeps us safest, the truth is it's what used to keep us safe when we had to depend on only the people in our house to keep us safe or to not hurt us. As adults, we have options. We have to learn that we have options. And so the person that thinks I am the problem, it's okay. I also think I'm the problem. So that's probably how we ended up together. We both think I'm the problem, right? If I begin to understand that, wait a minute, this can't all be my fault. No matter which one of the stress responses I'm using, I can begin to shift it, because if you're upset with me and I am trying to please you into being okay with me, and I start to realize maybe I don't have to please you. This is how hero training begins, right? But it's a process, and it's a longer, harder, more uncomfortable process as an adult than it would have been if we had gotten this training as a child. Just like any other training or education, though, even if we did get it as a child, even if we have secure attachment now, we will, again, be going into attachment in the next workshop. But even if we feel most of the time like we're not the problem, everybody has anxiety. Everybody is going to have moments where they worry that they're the problem, right? This is a lifelong, ongoing, ever evolving process of becoming our own hero, of becoming the hero instead of the villain. And the final part of this is every hero is someone's villain. So when you start to shift and you start to push back, especially in family relationships where you may have become the scapegoat and everybody sees you as the problem, or most people see you as the problem, and you start changing your habits, oh, that's going to be a problem, right? That shift, that change is going to increase the anxiety in other people, because their anxiety was alleviated by you being the problem. And if you refuse to be the problem, now they have to do something else with that anxiety, right? And so, in becoming your own hero, it's not even necessarily that you have to hate other people, right? Although I'm quite sure that if you're listening to this, you could probably use a healthy dose of anger and upset at how you were treated. But the illustration that's up is not that you have to hate the other person, but you can accurately hate how you're treated. You can accurately hate the idea of being the person who's in charge of everybody's feelings, instead of being the person that is the reason for everyone else's problem. And as you make that shift, people are going to be upset with you. As you set boundaries, people are going to be upset with you. When you say, oh, I won't be able to do that, to people who are used to you saying, oh, I'd love to. How can I help? You're right. I'm sorry. Like, as you shift that, you're going to be other people's villains. And that's okay. Because no one, I mean no one, not one person, if you think of the greatest person you know in history, in your family, in your life, personally, professionally, what have you, whoever a lot of people love, I promise you there is somebody who cannot stand them. And learning to be okay with that is a huge part of being a hero. And so that concludes the presentation part of this workshop. I hope that you found it helpful. You can visit our website at 360citizens.org for access to this workshop once it's available, as well as to the upcoming workshops over the next few months. And if you have any questions, you can contact us and we would be happy to answer them. We are going to go into the Q&A segment of this workshop, and that part will not be recorded. But again, if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to inbox, text, email, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. Again, I'm Shay with 360 Citizens.